Remember what the back side of the chassis looked like when we first started? Here it is. This back panel was pretty rusty. In fact, there was really nothing I could do with this chrome to try and bring it back. There's the output transformer can. It was looking pretty rough itself, and you saw the main power transformer. And here's what we have now. I haven't yet installed the fuse holders here, but this is basically what the back side of this chassis looks like. You see the transformer is all painted. That output transformer can is painted, and the back face of the chassis is painted. Like I said, I couldn't save the chrome, so I did need to paint it. But I was able to save the chrome on most of the chassis, and you can see I polished it up, and it polished up really nicely. And I was able to save the sticker on that one electrolytic can, so that looks pretty good too. Here are those choke cans, L17 and L25, before we did anything with them. And here's the main power transformer. Looks pretty rough, eh? Here's the top of that chassis now. Those choke cans look really nice. And that main power transformer looks pretty good too. Of course, I hadn't yet repaired that scratch that I made when I was assembling it in this part of the video. But I've since repaired that, and the final look of the video will show that repaired. One thing I didn't do yet is I'm going to clean up those screws. I haven't done that. But otherwise, this thing is all set to go. Looks real nice, doesn't it? Now here's a view of the top side looking down at the transformer cans, the FMIF transformer cans. They're made of aluminum, and that chrome had just lost all adhesion to the aluminum. Looked really rough. The choke cans, you see a lot of pitting. These choke cans are actually plated like with copper or brass. So what you're seeing in the pitting is not really rust. It's that material. This big can here was almost completely devoid of chrome. The metal itself is good, the aluminum is good, but the chrome was shot, so it had to come off all the way. Looking at the backside, you see the backside of the chassis. It's not too bad, but certainly those cans just make it look awful, and they needed to be cleaned up. It was a lot of work, and you can see the base of this thing around those stickers on the side where the speaker plug is and so forth. Wasn't too bad either, but it definitely needed to be cleaned up and would benefit from some work. There was plenty of work to do on this thing, and it took many, many hours of just plain grunt labor to get it cleaned up. Now, I had to, there's an electrolytic can there that you see wasn't yet painted. I've long ago painted that, and it's ready to install on the chassis. So the components are all ready to go. And here you go, it's all assembled. You see that side with the speaker plug looks beautiful now. I was able to save those stickers like I thought I would. They look great, they're totally original. You see the electrolytic can with its original sticker looks really nice. The top of the chassis box looks great, it just shined up great, but I had to remove every component to polish that. So here it sits after many, many hours of work and a sore shoulder and sore elbow. But I've got it ready to go. So let me show you the steps of how I did some of this work and show you how I arrived at this point. I did want to show you a before and after right away, so you got the idea of how it turned out. So what I'm doing right now is I'm removing the choke coils one at a time. This is L17. These are potted coils, so I had to determinate the wires. On this one I clipped one wire because the wire dress was too difficult to try and recreate after I did the work. And the other one I pulled off of the tube socket. So I can put this back together exactly as it was, but I will turn it around so that the better chrome plating faces the viewer from the back side of the chassis. I'll clean up the whole thing, but the better chrome plating is on one side. So this is the side that was facing the viewer, and then this is the side that will be facing the viewer. I have always painted small items like these transformer cans with a product called Steel It. Steel It's great stuff. It goes on smoothly. You don't really have to worry about it running because it's fairly thick stuff, and it dries with a nice sheen. Not glossy, not flat, just in between. And it uses, I think it's 316 stainless steel pigment, powdered stainless steel for pigment. The trouble is that last time I bought it was about a year and a half ago, and I bought it from an auto paint supply store that has since gone out of business. And I'll be darned if I can't find this stuff anywhere in town. And buying it on the internet is difficult, and then when you find it, it's really, really expensive. And then I was talking to a machinist friend of mine at work. He runs a machine shop. I work in a factory, and he runs a machine shop. And he was telling me about something that he's been using when he does work that requires coating afterward. Now, we still use Steel It in the factory, only because, you know, our company buys lots of it, and so it's easier for us to get at a decent price there. But this machinist friend of mine has tried this other product at home, and he said it works just as well as Steel It. It lasts just as long, and it prevents rust just as well. But it's less expensive to buy, and it's easier to get in smaller quantities, and you can buy it easily over the internet. And here is what it is. It's just Rust-Oleum appliance epoxy. It is very nice stuff. It does a real good job. I've always liked Rust-Oleum products. They're sort of the premium of consumer-grade spray paints. They do a nice job, and they last a long time. They maintain their color and their gloss for a long time. So I thought I'd give it a shot. And since I had run out of Steel It, I couldn't paint these with Steel It. And hell, it'd be about a month before the stuff would show up on my door, even if I could order it directly from the company. I've done that before, and it took a long time. So I tried it on these. And you know what? These were in really rough shape. And you can see some of the pitting and stuff that was on the can that I'm not able to remove. I'll position the can so that can't be seen. But this stuff did a nice job, and it looks just like Steel It. It's going to work out fine. I painted this a few days ago, and I didn't really want to feature it on the vid until I had a chance to look at it and do a little scratch test and see how it dried and that kind of thing, and check sturdiness. And yeah, it'll scratch off, but so would Steel It. The thing about it, I suspect it's going to be like Steel It, that it takes probably a good week for it to cure completely where it's difficult to remove. I restored a 1957 Volkswagen Beetle, probably 16 or 17 years ago. And I painted the inner fender wells. At the time I was living in Salt Lake City area, and we get a lot of salt on the roads. These Utah Department of Transportation folks get a little excited with the salt. I think they're afraid if they don't use all of this year's supply, they won't get any next year. So, you get half an inch of snow, and they're putting dump trucks full of salt on the road. Well, I didn't want to not be able to drive that Beetle in the wintertime if I needed to. So I didn't make a habit of it, but I occasionally drove it in the winter. Beetles, by the way, are fun to drive in the winter. So I went ahead and painted the underside of this Beetle with a product called Por 15, which those of you that are in the car world know about Por 15. It's good at stopping rust, it bonds with rust, and it prevents rust. But there were places that it wasn't practical to use the Por 15, and in those places I used Steel It. I bought it in gallon cans. I thinned it with a little bit of the oil as it was suggested by the product manufacturer, and I sprayed it out of an HVLP spray gun with large orifice and just dumped the Steel It on the underside of these fenders. It dried really smoothly. I didn't have any runs, even though I put a bunch of it on there. And you know what? That was 15 or 16 years ago. That Steel It still looks good today, and it's not rusting anywhere. So I love the product. It's a good, sturdy product. Inside of fender wells is a tough environment, yet it has held up really well. Well, I'm expecting this stuff to be about the same. It smells the same, it looks the same, it feels the same. I suspect that the formulation in this is really similar to Steel It, and I'm going to use that on the rest of the components that I need to coat on this 800B, and I fully expect that this is going to look fantastic when it's all put together. So here are 3 more cans all done. I already have 1 can done. And here's that can. And then here are the transformers that are uncovered with their cans removed. Now I'm a little uncomfortable leaving them like that for very long. So I'm going to go ahead and get these cans mounted. I'll fix up those chokes that I mentioned a few minutes ago. And then I'll show you a picture of the top side of the chassis with all that done. Okay, time for a little before and after. This is the before on L25. This is the other of those 2 big chokes that I have to do. So you see there's corrosion, some discoloration here. Now, I think I mentioned this earlier. This is not some of this is not really rust, not on these choke cans, because these cans I think are plated with either brass or copper or something, because if you look closely at the pitting, what you see underneath is not steel and not rust, it's a gold color, kind of like brass. So I bet if I stripped the copper or the chrome off of these cans, what I would find underneath would not be just plain steel. And that probably explains why these cans are in significantly better shape than the steel transformer cans, the tall skinny cans were, because that chrome just came off in sheets, and it's like it wasn't hardly adhering to the metal underneath at all. This is adhering like crazy, and I know if you plate copper or you plate brass, it really adheres well. So here you go. So this is L25. And I don't think I showed you this with that L17. Well, I'll show you on L17. What you have is just a very large choke, which looks like a transformer, but it only has 2 leads. A very large choke that's in here with some potting tar, and I have no interest in removing that. Both of the chokes, 17 and 25, are good, so I'm not going to mess with that. Let's look at the chassis, the top of the chassis right now. I've cleaned some of it. I've cleaned around these FM-IF transformers and that limiter transformer. So I've done a little bit of that. I haven't waxed it or anything yet. But then you see the rest of this chrome really isn't so terrible. I was talking about having to put a border around that transformer, but I don't believe that's going to be necessary. I figured out a way that I can get that pretty clean, and I'm not going to have to do that. So it's going to look really sharp. I will have to paint that can. That's the output transformer cover. So it's going to be like those chokes. I'm just going to spray some clear on these, and mostly because I want to protect that paper label. The clear that I'll use is matte. You'll never know it's there. But I want to protect it, and I want to stop this aluminum pitting that's occurring. I want to stop it in its tracks. So I'll do that. This can, this is the last of the skinny steel cans that needs to be painted. And you see that chrome just sheeted right off of there, and the metal is not rusty. So the chrome did not adhere. And you know what? I could be wrong. I guess that's, you know what? I've been saying steel. That's stupid. That's not steel. That's aluminum. That can is aluminum. So the cans, the skinny cans are aluminum. The choke cans are plated steel and then plated with chrome. So I believe they're plated with brass and then plated with chrome, or they're brass cans, but I think they're steel. But in any event, there's brass under that chrome or copper. And this may be just like those choke cans. This may not be rust. It may just be that the chrome pitted to the point where you can see a copper color underneath it, which is what looks like rust. So we'll get to it. I'm not sure that I'm going to remove that transformer. I'm going to try to remove the end bells. We'll see how that goes and leave the transformer itself in place. It's going to be hard. And then I'll hand paint the transformer laminated section. All right, so there's the plan. Hopefully real soon you're going to see this amplifier topside finished. And then I'm going to go ahead and finish the fuses and a few of the filament bypass caps that are still under there to do, and then I'm done with this amp. All right, guys, let's get to work. Here's the chassis partway assembled. I have all the cans painted. Somehow this little opening cover got away from me. I'll find it around somewhere. It's painted too, but it got away from me and rolled under a bench or something. So I got part of the chassis polished. Those two choke cans go right there in those holes. The 2 holes right in the center of the picture. I still have to get that transformer off, and I wanted to just take the end bells off and clean them up, but the wires pass through a hole, not a slot, so I've got to remove the transformer. So I'm probably gonna have to cut the wires and lift the damn thing off of there, but I'll be able to get a better job of it anyway. So there are some of those transformer wires, and I could spend the next month chasing those down and desoldering them from their locations and have all kinds of struggle. Or I can just clip those wires right in this neighborhood down here and then solder them back together when I reinstall the transformer, because on the other side I have this similar situation. You can see wires going out to the rectifiers. Now I might desolder those because those are fairly easy to get to, But these over here are a bugger, and I don't really want to chase those down and mess with all kinds of wire dress issues. So, okay, I have desoldered, clipped, and otherwise detached all the wires for this main power transformer. So I'm going to go ahead and lift it off the chassis now. Hopefully I got everything, because I'm going to lift it straight up. I hate pulling transformers. It's one of those jobs that's just no fun to do. Alright. And I'll go ahead, and the whole reason I did this was so that I could get this stupid transformer repainted and prepared so that it wasn't the only thing on the chassis that looked nasty. Alright, back to work I go. And get the camera positioned better. Had a lot of problems with my camera automatically selecting the portrait mode, which is not the best way to film or record, and it's driving me nuts. This I tell you something, the Samsung camera is really good at first blush, but it drives you nuts with its quirks. I have to remember when I put this thing back in that there is a shield, transformer shield lead, that just rests on this, this looks like, this is like an E plate, the E laminated section. Just rests in here, and then the end bell covers it up. And so that, I'm sure, grounds the shield that's inside the transformer to the this part of the frame of the transformer. So I'm going to go ahead and have to make sure that's there on good clean metal. Then I'm not really, it's really not wise to sand the laminates, because then you get crap down in between and it causes problems. So all I'm going to do is really quickly with some isopropyl or something like that, clean that off, and then I'm going to spray, probably spray some paint on. Since I have it apart to this point, I'll go ahead and spray some black on there. And then I'm going to go ahead and clean these up and spray them. I no longer have a sandblaster, so I'm just going to have to do this the old-fashioned crude way with my wire wheel, but that'll work. Also, I'll finish cleaning the top of this chassis, and then I'll be done with the cosmetic part of this chassis. I still have the whole tuner chassis to do in the record player and the speaker, but at least I'll be done with the cosmetics of this chassis. It's actually looking pretty good. Here's a picture of a couple of cars I restored back in my car collecting days. I told you before that I liked eclectic stuff, and here we go. This is a 1978 Honda Civic. Nothing terribly special about that, except this was a Civic with a Honda-matic, which was their 2-speed semi-automatic. Really kind of an odd little car, absolutely gutless, but a real blast to drive anyway, and it turned heads because you don't see very many of these around in good condition. Here's another view of these two cars. The other one is my Coral Red. Some people called it pink. I usually didn't talk too long to those people. Coral Red, 1957 Volkswagen Beetle. The last year of the so-called oval window Beetles. This car had the original 36 horsepower engine, which I rebuilt myself, and it had the original transmission, swing axle transmission, which I also rebuilt myself. I did a pan-off restoration on this, so the body came off the pan. I completely restored the entire pan, everything, suspension, brakes, the whole 9 yards. This is the one that I painted Pour 15 in the wheel wells. I painted the pan with Pour 15, and then I painted the bottom of the pan with Steel It, as well as the wheel wells. Sounds a little bit strange, but I'll be darned, it lasted really well, and it lasted a long time. This was one of the best running 36 horsepower engined cars that I've ever owned, and I've owned a few of them. This thing, when I drove it mostly in the mountains, and I believe that when you rebuild an engine, you drive it like you're going to use it. So I drove this thing right from the get-go during break-in period, up the mountains, down the mountains, through the canyons, the whole thing. Drove it as fast as it would go, never bought into the whole notion that you drive it real gentle at first. I drove it as fast as it would go. And the whole time I owned this car, I owned this car for about 15 years, this car was capable of doing somewhere around 70 miles an hour, which is damned good for a 36 horse, stock 36 horse Volkswagen Beetle. Really nice car, really pretty car, painted the inside and the out, did everything on the car, and I was really proud of it. Kind of sad to let it go, and I wish I hadn't, but you know, you got to move on, and I moved into radios and got out of cars. All right, guys, I will pick up the rest of this, making the amp chassis look pretty in the next video, and then finally, we'll get to move on to the tuner. This is Michael from Salt Lake City. That's all for now.